Uncle Tunde, please stop. It is painful, Daniel screamed. But Tunde held his mount till he succeeded with his plan. A long time ago, in the bustling city of Lagos, there lived a little boy named Daniel and his mother Sarah. Sarah had just divorced Daniel's father due to domestic violence. She moved to Lagos far away from him to start life afresh. Sarah was a housewife to Daniel's father, and as a result of that, she was left with nothing after the divorce. She got a job at a bank in Lagos where she worked very hard. Daniel would stay for after school lessons till she closed from work. Daniel and his mother continued to live happily, gradually adjusting to the new life. He was a very smart boy, often scoring the highest in his class. One day, Sarah had tons of work to do at the office, which made her stay longer than usual. Daniel was left alone in school with his substitute teacher, Mr. Tunde. He stayed with him till Sarah returned later that evening. Sarah thanked Mr. Tunde for his kind gesture, and they both exchanged pleasantries. Surprisingly, Sarah and Tunde found out that they lived in the same estate. Since I closed earlier than you, maybe it will be better for Daniel to be coming home with me, and you can pick him up from my house when you return, Tunde said to Sarah. Sarah was so happy, and with her deep knowledge of Mr. Tunde, she agreed to the arrangement. The first few weeks were very exciting for Daniel. He would close early from school, do his homework, and watch cartoon before Sarah comes back from work. Uncle Tunde bought a lot of snacks for him, which he often packed home as a reward for his good behavior. Sarah was extremely happy that she felt comfortable working extra hours so she could make more money. After a couple of weeks, Tunde could no longer contain his lust. He would ask Daniel to go and bathe, where he would be looking at him secretly. Later, he began to touch the innocent boy in a lustful manner. Tunde was evil. Few weeks passed, his lust intensified. One afternoon, as Daniel was observing his siesta, Tunde went to his room and began to touch him in a manner Daniel was uncomfortable with. Poor Daniel did not understand what was happening, and before he knew it, he became intimate and had his way with him. Uncle Tunde, please stop. It is painful, Daniel screamed. But Tunde held his mount till he succeeded with his plan. Daniel cried, calling out to his mother, but Sarah was still far away. Tunde gave Daniel some drugs to calm his pain and fever before Sarah returned. Let whatever happened today stay between us. Do not tell your mommy anything, or else I will tell your friends in school that you bedwet, and the principal will bring you out in the assembly for everyone to laugh at you before expelling you from the school. If you don't want this to happen, do not say anything to anyone, Tunde shamefully said to Daniel. Being a scared little boy, Daniel did not say anything to anyone. The next day, Daniel was scared to go to school. He begged his mother not to send him to school that day. When Sarah asked him the reason, Daniel began to cry, and he was too scared to tell his mother because of what Mr. Tunde said. You cannot skip school without any tangible reason, Sarah said to him as he continued to cry. Okay, mommy, please promise me you will come very early to pick me up from school. I am not too well. Please promise me, mommy. Daniel pleaded with his mother as she made him a promise. Later that day, when it was approaching the closing hour, Daniel was terrified. He prayed for his mother to keep to her promise, but she did not. When it was closing time, Mr. Tunde took Daniel home. The poor boy was scared for his life. He remembered the pain he went through the previous day and prayed for a miracle to happen. But his hopes were dashed when Tunde repeated the act, giving him high dose of painkillers to ease his pain before his mother came back from work. Daniel begged him, but Tunde refused, stating that the experience would make him a man. This continued for a long time and poor Daniel became mute. He no longer spoke, smiled, or associated with his friends. Sarah was very busy and carried away that she could not notice the severity of her son's condition. She worked even on weekends, which left Daniel utterly traumatized. A few times, Daniel summoned the courage to tell her, but she was occupied with work to even listen to her own child. The innocent boy had no choice than to accept all that Mr. Tunde was doing to him and hoped for the day it would stop. Tunde would buy him lots of snacks and toys just to make his mother never to suspect anything. One day, Daniel was unable to sit properly. He began to leap. When Sarah saw him, she asked what was wrong. Daniel saw that as a perfect opportunity to explain to her. But before he could begin, a phone call came in and Sarah went to take it, forgetting all about him. He went to his wardrobe and took some medicine as instructed by Tunde. His teachers noticed his change in character and decided to reach out to Sarah through letters, but Tunde would tear them all, as he was now the one taking him to school and bringing him back home. One day, one of the school teachers crossed paths with Sarah at the bank. She tried telling her to be careful with the way she leaves Daniel in Tunde's care, but Sarah shunned her and asked her to mind her business. The teacher felt embarrassed and decided never to interfere again. On one Saturday, after dropping Daniel off at Tunde's house, Sarah felt unwell at work and decided to go home and rest. On her way, she stopped at Mr. Tunde's house to pick up her son. When she approached the door, she heard her son's voice. He was begging Mr. Tunde. She looked through the window to see what exactly was happening, and to her greatest shock, she saw Tunde being intimate with Daniel. Sarah screamed and broke down the door to save her son. Her scream drew the attention of the neighbor, who quickly ran to her rescue. She could not believe what she had seen. She grabbed Daniel while the neighbors heard Tunde. Daniel narrated everything and how long it lasted. Everyone was shocked. They immediately called the police and arrested Tunde, while they blamed Sarah for being a careless mother. Daniel was immediately admitted at the hospital, where he received proper treatment for days, after which he was taken for therapy. Sarah regretted ever neglecting her child and prioritizing her work over his well-being. She immediately resigned from the job in order to be able to care for her son. She asked Daniel for forgiveness, promising him that she would never neglect him again. While Tunde was sentenced by the court to years imprisonment with hard labor. Thank you for listening to today's story. I hope you learned a lesson or two. If you did, kindly like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so before. It is totally free, and also leave a comment so we can discuss. We love and appreciate you, and I'd like to see you in our next story. What will you do when you find out that your sister-in-law uses her menstrual blood to cook in her restaurant. Will you expose her or keep it a secret? Once upon a time, there lived a woman named Shalewa. She was a widow who owned a small restaurant known as Mama Put. But people did not patronize her because Shalewa did not know how to cook delicious meals. Those who tasted her meals found one complaint after another. It was either the food was too spicy or salty. Shalewa was a spoiled girl whilst growing up, and she was fortunate to marry a very wealthy man who was able to tolerate her shortcomings. However, her husband advised her to learn how to cook and take care of the home, but Shalewa refused because she wanted to live the lazy life. She had twin daughters, after which her husband passed away. Her in-laws took over all her husband's properties and sent her away because she did not have a son. Because of Shalewa's pride, no one was willing to help her. After exhausting all she had, she became stranded with her daughters. Shalewa became desperate for money, and so she decided to open a restaurant because her sister-in-law had one and she was doing well. Shalewa, with no knowledge of how to cook, started a restaurant business which did not see the light of day. Even her own children were unable to eat her food. Her sister-in-law mocked her every day because of how lazy and proud she was. Do you think you will ever succeed in this business of yours? You cannot even peel yam properly because of how lazy you are. Instead of you to swallow your pride and learn, you opened a restaurant opposite mine just to spite me. Let me see how people will patronize you. A full-grown woman, and yet there is nothing you can do. Tell the twins to come to my place whenever they are hungry before they die from that poison you call food, she said to Shalewa. Shalewa was angry. All through that day, she thought of what her sister-in-law said. No, I must make it in this business and prove to that woman that she's nothing. How dare she talk to me that way? I will do whatever it takes to disgrace her like she did to me today, Shalewa said to herself. She visited a voodoo house in desperation and she got a solution to her problem. The following week, she prepared the meal as instructed, but this time around, the aroma from the food occupied the air in the village and everyone wanted to know who made it. They followed the smell and arrived at Shalewa's restaurant. Everyone was surprised because she was known to make awful meals. They all looked at each other while their throats salivated for the food. Good day, my people. I know you all will be surprised that such aroma came from my restaurant because of your previous experiences. But trust me, I know how to make good food. I have decided to use my mother's recipe instead. Have a taste of it, and if you don't like the food, do not bother paying me any money, Shalewa said to them as she went into the kitchen to dish the food. The villagers stared at each other in surprise and they agreed to give it a try. Shalewa served everyone the food. As they took their first bite, there was great silence in the place. Everyone was shocked because they had never tasted food as sweet as that before. This is the best food I have ever tasted in my entire life, a villager exclaimed as the rest people responded in agreement. They all rushed their food and requested for another. In less than 30 minutes, Shalewa finished selling all the food she had made. All who tasted the food went into the village to announce it. Shalewa was happy because her plan had begun to work. Very early the next day, she woke up and made twice the amount she prepared the previous day. Before she could finish, a large crowd was already waiting for her outside with their individual plates. Shalewa served them, and in less than 30 minutes, she finished selling everything. This continued for a long time, but her children never tasted her food. Her sister-in-law lost all her customers to her. She started suspecting a foul play because Shalewa was known to be lazy and there was no way she could become the best cook overnight. Tope discussed it with some of her customers, but they all felt she was jealous of Shalewa's progress. Tope confronted Shalewa, but she gave her the biggest disgrace of her life. Everyone who saw them laughed because they all thought she was jealous. Tope sat in her restaurant crying when all of a sudden a hand touched her from behind. It was her twin nieces. They were looking sad and weak. Tope quickly wiped her face and asked them what the problem was. "We are very hungry, Auntie Tope. We have not eaten since yesterday," they said. Tope found this to be strange. "What do you mean you have not eaten? Go and meet your mother to give you some food," Tope said to them. "Our mother does not allow us to eat from the food she sells. She doesn't even eat from the food herself. She warned us never to taste the food or else something bad would happen to us. Please, Auntie Tope, give us some food. We are very hungry." Tope was shocked at the statement. She rushed into the kitchen and gave them food. They both ate like children that had been starved for days. Tope told them to come over whenever they were hungry, and they thanked her and left before their mother could see them. This went on for days, and Tope knew she had to do something about it. She woke up very early and secretly went to spy on Shalewa, but to her greatest shock, she saw some strange beings cooking, after which Shalewa poured her menstrual blood in the food. Immediately this happened, a very strong aroma evaporated and the strange beings disappeared. Tope was shocked. She knew she needed to act very fast. Not too long, the villagers began to gather in her restaurant. Shalewa served them with a smile on her face. Tope was scared because the villagers were in bondage, but she needed to help them. She told her husband everything. He was shocked at how far she went. "We need to act immediately before it becomes too late." They went to a powerful native doctor and told him all that had happened. The native doctor told them that the only way for her to confess was to give the food to her children. Tope refused. "They are my late brother's children. I cannot let them suffer for their mother's sins. Please, wise one, there has to be another way," Tope pleaded. The native doctor brought out a small medicine and gave it to her. "There is no other way. Give the food to the children or else everyone in the village will continue to be in bondage." However, once the effect of the food had taken place and Shalewa had confessed, "Give this medicine to them so they can wake up before they completely transit to the land of the dead. You have to be fast about it," he said to Tope. Tope and her husband were scared, but they had no choice. The next day, Tope sent someone to help her get food from Shalewa, after which she called the twins and asked them to come and eat. They ate the food, not knowing it was made by their mother. Moments later, they fell to the ground. Tope shouted and the villagers gathered. "What have you done?" they questioned Tope. Tope told them that she only gave them food that their mother cooked. Immediately Shalewa heard this. She screamed and began to confess. I am not the one who cooked the food. The food is made with my menstrual blood, by spirit. My children are not allowed to eat from it, else something bad will happen to them. Please help me, Shalewa pleaded. Immediately, a strange lightning appeared out of nowhere and struck her dead. Tope quickly gave them the medicine as instructed by the native doctor, and they woke up immediately. The villagers were shocked. Some tried vomiting what they had eaten, while others fell to the ground crying and laying curses on Shalewa's corpse. Tope took the children inside so they would not see their mother. The villagers, in anger, threw her body into the forest. They demanded for the children to be punished as well, but Tope told them that they were also victims of their mother's cruelty. The villagers thanked Tope for what she had done, and Shalewa's restaurant was set ablaze. Thank you for listening to this story. Please click on the like and subscribe button to support this channel for free. And also turn on the notification bell so you will be the first to see our new stories. We love and appreciate you. See you in our next story. The pastor invited them to a conference. When they got there, they saw a lot of popular, powerful pastors. Pastor Paul told them that will be their story if they are willing to make certain sacrifices. Without any hesitation, they agreed to whatever he wanted them to do. That night, they were initiated into an occultic organization. A whole lot of powerful pastors were in attendance, chanting and singing. Many years ago, there was a girl named Maria. She was a simple girl from a humble background. She was well known in the community as an obedient child, often leading the Sunday school classes and other church activities. Prayers were her best activities, to the extent her mates nicknamed her Mother Teresa. Maria grew up and still followed the path she knew best, the ministry. She sang and ministered with a voice that kept people at a standstill. Her dream was to get married to a powerful pastor or be a pastor to a great ministry. But things took a twist when she crossed paths with Thomas, an unbeliever she invited for service. Thomas and Maria became very close, despite him being aware of Maria's passion for the church. He did not believe in the power of the church, but rather saw the church as a business he would like to venture into. Knowing that Maria would not comply, he convinced her that he had found God and he was told to go into ministry. Maria was so happy, and they began to gather congregation for their church, which they named Omega Fire for Power. But things did not go as planned. People were not coming despite Thomas's constant research on sermons and Maria's angelic voice. One day, a very rich and popular pastor named Paul came to their church, and after service, he walked up to Thomas and Maria and told them that he could see the bright future in the church. However, things will remain so if they did not do the needful. Thomas and Maria begged him for his help. The pastor invited them to a conference. When they got there, they saw a lot of popular, powerful pastors. Pastor Paul told them that would be their story if they are willing to make certain sacrifices. Without any hesitation, they agreed to whatever he wanted them to do. Pastor Paul invited them for a meeting. Thomas and Maria, in desperation to succeed, honored the invitation, which took place at midnight. That night, they were initiated into an occultic organization. A whole lot of powerful pastors were in attendance, chanting and singing. Maria sacrificed her ability to conceive in exchange for a powerful voice, while Thomas sacrificed his ability to sleep at night for miraculous powers. After the ritual, the member of the court congratulated them and welcomed them fully. The next Sunday, people started filling up the church. Maria's singing drew all the passerby to the extent they all forgot about the church they were going to. People often cried when she sang and ministered, after which Thomas would come preach and perform miracles. Soon, others heard of the miracles. They rushed to the church. It did not take long. The permanent construction of the church started, and in the space of 3 months, they moved to the huge space where they had several services. Thomas was soon nicknamed Apostle Sharp Sharp because of how fast his miracles were. He had members rushing in with gifts such as money and even cars. Not too long, the church doubled in number, and in one of the crusades, Thomas shared water and mirrors to the church members, which he sold for a ridiculous amount of money. The highest bidder got the biggest mirror and water, but unknown to them, these were devices to monitor what was happening in their homes. The water he shared were to cause problems, which he saw in the mirror. He would call out members during service and give them the revelation, leaving the entire church in utter shock. On one occasion, he saw a couple fighting over their family issues. The next Sunday, he called the woman and told her that her mother-in-law was the cause of her problems, stating that she was a witch. The woman shouted and started rolling on the floor, believing every word that came out of Apostle Sharp Sharp's mouth. He further asked her to sow a ridiculous amount of money to liberate her from the bondage, which she did without wasting time. The woman went home that day and wreaked havoc on her mother-in-law, making her husband to send her out into the streets. After a while, Maria became very uncomfortable with what they were doing. She confronted Thomas and asked him to stop using God's name for false prophecies and deceiving people. This was not the reason I started ministry. We have to leave this court and stop with this evil before people get hurt, Maria said to Thomas. Thomas tried to convince her, but her mind was made up. Thomas felt threatened. He reported the situation at the meeting, and they told him to tame Maria before it gets out of hand. Thomas agreed because his church business was growing, and he was not willing to let go so quickly. He did exactly what was instructed and used Maria to get more powers by sacrificing her. Maria suddenly disappeared. She was no longer seen in church or anywhere. This grew the suspicion of one of the church members named Oge. She had been noticing strange atmosphere in the church, as she was a very strong Christian too. Oge took her investigation very serious as she became desperate to see to the bottom of the case. Meanwhile, not only was Apostle Sharp Sharp using dark powers, he was also sexually involved with his female members, often referring to his sperm as the holy fountain that would cleanse their spirits. One day, a very beautiful girl named Sarah came to the church with her mother. Sarah had just returned from overseas. When Thomas spotted her in the congregation, he brought her out and gave her a prophecy that her best friend was jealous of her, stating that she was responsible for her not getting married. "Ride on, Papa," the crowd hailed as they expressed their shock. "I will have to perform 7 days fasting and prayer for you, my daughter. But you have to show your dedication by sowing a seed so that God can hear your prayers." Thomas asked her to bring the sum of 1 million naira, else the bondage would not be able to break. Sarah and her mother quickly did as instructed. And later that day, Thomas went into his office and started laughing as usual. Sarah and her mother stormed her best friend's house and gave her the beating of her life, calling her a witch and accusing her of all the negative things that were happening in her life. Apostle Sharp Sharp continued like this and ruined a lot of family and friendships. But no one doubted him, apart from Oge, who was now keeping a close watch on him. One night, after hours of praying, Oge encountered Maria in the dream, where she told her everything about the powers and affairs of the church. In the dream, she narrated how she was killed and where she was buried, stating that Thomas was responsible for it. Oge woke up terrified. She had never had a dream as clear as that before. She prayed and fasted before she decided to visit where she was told. To her greatest shock, she found Maria's shallow grave at the bush in one of Thomas's properties. Oge took a video of it. This confirmation made her to believe everything she heard in the dream. Oge needed to get the ring on Thomas's finger because according to Maria, that was the source of his powers. She had no choice than to pretend to be one of the ladies interested in his miracles. All she needed was to get close enough to snatch it. In one of the services, when Thomas mentioned a prophecy, Oge immediately ran out before anyone could. She put on a show, falling to Thomas's feet, and when he attempted to lift her up, Oge grabbed his hand and, mentioning the name of God, she snatched it out of his fingers. Immediately this happened, Thomas began to change to half human, half serpent. The congregation took to their heels and ran away. Oge began to pray seriously. A few faith-driven people stayed behind and joined her. After an hour of intense prayers, Thomas changed back to human and began to confess everything he did, including Maria's death. When Oge was certain that he had become powerless, she handed him over to the police, but he died on his way to prison. The congregation were shocked after Oge narrated her encounter with Maria. We should all be vigilant to know that not all pastors are from God. Please, brothers and sisters, let us learn to know God for ourselves instead of falling victim of fake prophets. She said to them as she urged them to stop seeking desperate miracles. Due to the sacrifice and the blood that was shed on the church, the government seized it and destroyed it. The people learned a great lesson, and all those who were giving false prophecies went back to seek forgiveness from those they offended. But Pastor Paul still went on deceiving desperate believers. This is the end of this story. There are many lessons we can all take home today, but let me leave you with a few. Firstly, unlike Maria, we should all pray for lost souls, but be vigilant and draw a thin line at some point, because only God can truly save people. Secondly, desperation often attracts the devil, making it easier for him to gain access. And lastly, no good deed goes unpunished, and God can never be mocked. Thank you for listening to today's story. Do you think situations like this still happen in the world today? Leave a comment below and do not forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories. We love and appreciate you, and I would love to see you in our next story. What will you do if you come back home and find out that your soon-to-be brother-in-law had used your pet dog to cook pepper soup? Will you let it slide and forgive him, or call off the wedding that is in a few days? In the heart of a quiet town of Obong, there lived two sisters called Uyai and Itoro. They shared an unbreakable bond born from hardship and loyalty. Orphaned young, they had been each other's strength, facing life's trials together with unwavering support. Uyai, the oldest, was known far and wide for her successful jewelry business. She was respected and loved by the people for her kindness and determination, while Itoro was known for her eagle eyes, which never left her sister. Itoro was very protective of Uyai and never let her get into harm's way, even though she was the youngest. She had a dog named Coco. Coco was like her own child. It has lived with them for years, even when they were still struggling to survive on the streets. Itoro was the quiet one who wanted nothing more from life than to see her sister Uyai happy. Uyai, on the other hand, loved Itoro, but she wanted more. Someone she can fall in love with and live a fairy tale life with. Itoro wanted her to stop fantasizing, rather to be patient so she will find a good and responsible suitor who would love and cherish her. Uyai was once in an abusive relationship because of how romantic her partner was, but Itoro quickly intervened and separated them forever. One day, Uyai crossed paths with a stranger. His name was Edet. Edet was posted to Obong town for his youth service. Uyai fell in love with him immediately, and soon the love was reciprocated. Uyai and Edet started the relationship. Edet was sweet and very romantic. He bought her gifts and made her laugh. At first, Itoro supported the relationship, but later she developed cold feet because she discovered that Edet was only using Uyai for her money. Uyai was manipulated into providing for Edet. On one occasion, he made Uyai buy him a car. Itoro was furious. She warned Uyai several times, but her advice was unheeded. Soon, Edet asked Uyai to marry him, and she accepted without informing Itoro. Itoro was unhappy considering how fast the whole relationship was. Uyai was so happy, and the wedding preparation began. Few days later, Edet moved into their 3-bedroom apartment with his younger brother Ekong. This made Itoro furious because they came unannounced. But there was nothing more she could do because Uyai was the one paying for the house and she was deeply in love with Edith. This will make us even closer, Uyai said to Itoro. Why can't you see what I'm seeing? They are using you for your money. Who proposes so quickly? First, you are the one providing for him. Secondly, you bought him a car and now he has moved into our house with his brother without even asking for your permission. Who does that? Where have you ever heard that a man moved in with his fiancée? Uyai, I know you love him, but you need to open your eyes and face the reality before it becomes too late, Itoro said to Uyai. Maybe when you grow older, you will understand how love works. Until then, I don't want to hear of your complaints about Edet and Ekong again, Uyai responded to Itoro, with her face looking sad. Itoro felt bad for her sister because she had no idea of the harm that was coming her way. That period, she felt lonely, often seeking company with her dog Coco. Edet and Ekong became very aware of Itoro's suspicion, and they were uncomfortable with her in the house. They came up with different plans to separate the two sisters, but it was to no avail. Ekong hated her openly. Her presence in the house was a threat to him. One evening, while the family gathered for dinner, Ekong tossed Itoro a malicious smirk. I don't know why Oyaisi keep you around, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. With her money, she doesn't need a little beggar sister hanging on. Itoro clenched her fist, but she swallowed her anger, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she turned to Uyai, who was laughing blissfully, unaware of Ekong's bitterness. Uyai had worked so hard for her happiness, Itoro wouldn't ruin that for her. But Ekong wasn't satisfied. He found another way to cut deeper and make her suffer. He had seen how attached she was to her dog Coco, how she spent hours taking care of it, feeding and treating it like family. In his twisted mind, Coco was her weakness. And Ede, tired of Itoro's interference in his plans, didn't stop his brother. In fact, he encouraged it, knowing that once Uyai felt the tension between herself and Itoro, her bond with her sister would weaken. He saw Coco as the perfect way to break the sisters' closeness, to put a rift in their trust before the wedding. A few days before the wedding, Itoro went to the market as usual to stock up the house for the wedding preparations. But when she returned, she noticed that the house was unusually quiet and an odd smell lingered in the air. Coco, Uyai, she called out, her voice echoing in silence. This was unusual. She rushed towards her room to look for Coco, but it was nowhere to be found. She went to the kitchen and found Ekong stirring a pot of pepper soup, the steam thick with spices. He looked up, smirking as she entered. Ekong, where is Coco? She said, a knot forming in her stomach. Ekong didn't bother hiding his smugness. Coco, he drawled. In the pot, of course. You are smelling your precious dog right now, Itoro. The meat was perfect for pepper soup. Itoro felt her chest tightened, her heart pounding. With shock, her voice cracked as she whispered, You killed Coco? You know how much it means to me. Calm down. Edeth's voice cut in from the doorway. He leaned casually against the wall, his face devoid of sympathy. Ekong was just making sure we had enough meat for the wedding guests. Besides, it's only a dog, Itoro. You are being overdramatic. Itoro's rage fled, but she felt something deeper, a piercing betrayal. She looked from Ekong's satisfied smirk to Edeth's cold stare, realizing how carefully they have planned this. Only a dog? She managed to whisper. Coco was my family and both of you knew that. You did this on purpose to hurt me. Ekong smiled, entirely unbothered. If you don't like it, maybe it's time for you to stop sticking your nose into Uyai's affair. Just then, Uyai entered, drawn by the voices, but her face fell as she saw Itoro's tear-soaked face and the tense standoff. "What's going on?" she asked, confused, looking between Itoro and the two men. "Uyai," Itoro choked. "They killed Coco for pepper soup. They knew what he meant to me, but they did it just to hurt me." Uyai's face went pale, torn between her sister's hurt and her loyalty to Edet. "Itoro, please," she said softly, reaching out. "I'm so sorry. It's just tradition to serve meat to guests and..." "Tradition?" Itoro snapped, pulling away. "You think this is a bad tradition? Uyai, they are doing this to divide us, to make us hate each other." Uyai hesitated, her gaze flickering uncertainly between Itoro and Edet, who remained silent. Her hesitation sliced through Itoro like a blade. "Uyai," Itoro said, her voice breaking, "if you go through with this wedding, you are choosing them over me. I'm your sister. I've stood by you when no one else did." "Itoro, please. I love him. This wedding is everything I've worked for. I want you to understand," Uyai whispered, her eyes filling with tears. But Itoro's mind was already made up. She backed away, her heart pounding with hurt and anger. "Then make your choice, Uyai, because I will never forgive them or you for what you have done." With that, Itoro stormed out, leaving her sister speechless and the men smirking behind her. She could no longer hold back. If Edet and Ekun thought they could break her spirit, they were wrong. She showed them all that no one could mess with her without paying a heavy price. And with that, the seed of revenge were sown. Days after day, Uyai tried repeatedly to reach out to her sister, hoping to mend the damage her fiancé and his brother had done. But Itoro remained cold and distant, her heart hardened by the betrayal she suffered. She spent all her time alone, quietly grieving the loss of Coco and sitting at the injustice Edet and Ekong had shown her. Days later, Uyai and Edet got married. The wedding was a grand affair, filled with laughter and cheers. But it was bittersweet for Uyai, as Itoro, her only family, was not in attendance. There was gossip among the attendees. What kind of a sister is she to still go ahead with the wedding after all they did to Itoro? Some said, while others blamed Itoro for not showing up at her sister's wedding. Uyai convinced herself that with time, Itoro's anger would fade and things would return to normal. The first few weeks after the wedding were like the best days of Uyai's life. Edet pampered her like a queen and spoiled her with romance, which made Uyai trust him with her finance. But unknown to her, all that was just an act to gain access to her wealth. Days later, Uyai found Itoro's new house. She begged her forgiveness and tried convincing her that Edet was a very good man. "He's a very good man and he treats me well. Please, Itoro, come back home. We miss you so much," Uyai said. But Itoro hissed, "Only time will tell how truly foolish you are." But then, "Don't you ever show your face here again. Go and live in your imagination. As far as I'm concerned, I have lost my sister," Itoro said as she sent Uyai out of her house, in anger shutting the door against her. Uyai went home crying as she narrated everything to Edet. "Let her be. She's seriously jealous of the fact that you are married. I would advise you to stop reaching out till she comes back to her senses," Edet said as he gave a devious smile. Itoro's hatred for them continued to double and soon she could no longer contain it. She went to seek help to ruin Edet and Ekun's life, but she was advised not to do so. "Let karma do its job. Keep your hands clean and you will definitely get justice. Forgive your sister for she is blinded by love. Their days of reckoning is fast approaching," an elder said to her. Itoro decided to heal and move on with her life, one that did not include her sister. Months later, as Uyai was about to stock up her jewelry shop, she noticed that there was no money in the account anymore after she joined hers with Edet. Uyai was shocked and quickly went to Edet to demand for an explanation. "I used the money for a business, but I will replace it once the deal pulls through. Hold on for some weeks," he said to Uyai as he gave her a soft kiss. Uyai, without thinking much about it, decided to let it slide and wait till the deal pulled through. Few days later, Edet begged Uyai for some money to clear out the goods, stating that it was seized by the Nigerian custom. If I don't clear it out, we would lose everything. Please, Uyai, help your lovely husband. The goods I am expecting will change our lives once it hits the market. I will finally be able to take care of you fully, he said to her. But you already took all I had. Where do you expect me to get such money from? Uyai replied. Sell the goods in your shop, or better still, let's take a loan using the shop as collateral. I promise to pay back in the next couple of weeks, Edet said to Uyai as she became skeptical. Edet knew that Uyai was not going to comply easily, and so he decided to use her weak point, love. That night, Edet made love to her like he had never did before. Uyai became instantly carried away. The next day, she did as instructed by Edet. She took a huge loan, using her shop and piece of land as collateral, literally leaving her with nothing. Uyai gave everything to Edet, hoping to be paid back, but she was betrayed. Few days after Uyai gave the money to him, she came home from her shop just to find the house empty. Ekong and Edet's room was empty and her valuables gone. Uyai thought she had been robbed. She searched everywhere for her husband but found only a letter on the shelf. It was the one Edet left for her, explaining that she should not bother looking for them as they were far gone. Uyai immediately realized that she had been duped. She fell on the ground in shock as she struggled to catch her breath. Her eyes could not believe what she read. Ituro was right all along. I should have listened to my sister. My own is finished. Where will I start from? My enemies will laugh at me, she said as tears kept on rolling down her chin. Uyai screamed and her neighbors rushed to her house and saw the house empty. From the way she was crying, they knew what had happened because no one liked Edet and Ekong, but they respected them because of her. They tried consoling her, but it was to no avail. Each passing day, she would cry out her eyes. Soon, the loan was due for refund, but Uyai had nothing. She was asked to evacuate her shop, which left her utterly broke. Her land was taken over by the bank, and the landlord gave her a quick notice as her rent was already due. Uyai became depressed. She had nowhere else to go other than to seek help from her sister. One day, as Itoro was about going to work, she heard a knock on the door. When she opened, she saw Uyai drenched in her own tears. Immediately, Itoro knew what had happened. She let Uyai in, but did not let her utter a word before she grabbed her bag and left for work. Uyai regretted her actions and patiently waited for Itoro to return. Later that evening, when Itoro came back, Uyai fell on her knees and begged for her forgiveness. How do you feel now that you have lost everything? Itoro asked. Uyai buried her head in shame as she continued to ask for her forgiveness. Itoro was enraged, but she kept her emotions in check as she continued to avoid her. Uyai spent the next couple of weeks trying to get on Itoro's good side, till the two sisters finally went back to how they used to be. Uyai started afresh with help from Itoro. She got a new shop and narrated all that had happened to her customers, who patronized her so she could get back on her feet. Few months passed. Ekong parted with all of Edet's money so he could relocate and start a good life. But unfortunately, he was involved in a ghastly motor accident, which rendered him paralyzed. The onlookers from the moment of the accident took the money and robbed him. Ekong spent weeks at the hospital, after which he was discharged because there was no money to continue his treatment. And his brother, Edet, abandoned him in his vegetable state because of what he did to him. Edet could not stand the thought of being poor again, so he became involved in a romance scam which led him to jail. He was sentenced to years imprisonment as his victim died of high blood pressure. Uyai and Itoro together rebuilt an empire, one who surpassed the previous one, and they lived happily ever after. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to this story. Please click on the like and subscribe button to support this channel for free. And also turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to see our new stories from this channel. Do not forget that we love and appreciate you. See you in our next story.